This video was inspired by an article on Sky Sports. It's available on the Sky Sports Boxing Twitter page and available on the Sky Sports website. Barry Hearn is quoted as saying, "Anthony Joshua will be world heavyweight champion in 2016. And the article effectively revolves around how Barry Hearn believes Anthony Joshua will be a world champion in the heavyweight division by the end of this year. Now, for me, this is ridiculous. I think this is borderline mismanagement of a fighter. And it is, for me, reminiscent and reminds me somewhat of David Price and the way Frank Maloney managed him. Now, let me say, up until this point, I think the Hearns have done a fantastic job managing Anthony Joshua. They certainly did an amazing job with the Dillian Whyte fight, and I think they built him up well, good learning fights along the way. It's unfortunate he hasn't got the rounds, but fighters like Gary Cornish, fighters like Kevin Johnson, probably were the right kind of fights to make at that stage of his career. So I give them credit for what they've done in the past. What I'm worried about is the mismanagement of Anthony Joshua going forward, and I'm going to touch on that now. Whilst the Dillian Whyte-Anthony Joshua fight was such a phenomenal success, we did fantastic numbers in terms of pay-per-view buys, as we know. It's rumoured to have done 450,000 pay-per-view buys. Anthony Joshua earned a fantastic purse off the back of it, rumoured to be a £3 million purse for a British title fight. Amazing stuff. In many ways, they've created a rod for their own back. And the reason they've created the rod for their own back is because of the Sky business model of boxing on pay-per-view, right? Sky's in a difficult place at the minute with its sports platform. You've got new competitors entering the market, BT Sport, etc. They had to massively overbid for the Premier League football, which we know about. And it basically means that they are putting increasing pressure, as I perceive it, on boxing to provide big pay-per-view events. Now, a lot of fans are wondering, why is it that after the Anthony Joshua-Dillian Whyte fight in December, Joshua's not going to be in the ring again until April? Well, let me tell you why. It's because Quick vs Frampton was already booked for a pay-per-view, and the Hearns wanted to leave enough time between that fight and between the next pay-per-view, which will obviously feature Anthony Joshua in April. For me, this is how they like to do their model. It's a pay-per-view event every other month, and we're going to see that at play here. So what they've created now is a system where Anthony Joshua will be fighting on pay-per-view in April, and there will be pressure to do as well in terms of the numbers as they did against Dillian Whyte. Now, whilst Joshua has got an ever-increasing profile, and whilst he is becoming a star of the sport, not enough credit is given to how much Dillian Whyte actually did to build up that fight. Anthony Joshua, sometimes with his stay humble kind of character, is not always the most entertaining fighter you'll ever see during a build-up and during a press conference. For me, Dillian Whyte bought the hype, he bought the drama, he bought the chat, he bought, the kind of bad blood. And for me, that's why that event did so well. It wasn't just because it was a British title fight in the heavyweight division. It wasn't just because it was Anthony Joshua, the amazing prospect and Olympic gold medalist. It was that bad blood from the amateur days, and it was the bad blood during the build-up that helped make that event the sensation it was going to be today. Now, obviously they'll be under pressure to repeat that. And I don't see where that repeat number is coming from, to be honest. Not in April, anyway. I mean, for me, Joshua Chisora, Joshua Price, Joshua Helenius, Joshua Tepper, whilst these are possibly better fights than Joshua Whyte for the boxing hardcore fan, from a pay-per-view and business perspective, I don't think any of those fights do the numbers that Joshua Whyte did. I thought the history and the bad blood made that the success it was. And I think the Hearns realise this, and that's why I think they're going to be increasing the pressure on Anthony Joshua to get to the world title level. The only other opponent who could probably help Joshua hit those pay-per-view numbers again below world title level is David Haye. And I mean, could Joshua versus Haye happen in April? It's not impossible, but my thought process is that Hearn would like to do that more in the summer to get it at Wembley Stadium if it was going to happen at all. So I think they're pushing Joshua too quickly down the world title route. And I think the reason they're going to do that is because of an increasing urgency to make him a pay-per-view fighter and an increasing urgency to repeat the numbers and repeat the success that they've enjoyed with the Dillian Whyte fight. And I don't think they're going to repeat that success unless they get him to world title level. Fights against Wilder, fights against Fury. You know, even the Glazkov-Martin winner, whilst that may not be the most inspiring of world title fights, to have that world title on the line and to have Anthony Joshua as a world champion will perhaps raise the publicity of the event to the point that it will be equally successful. So, why I think they've made a rod for their own back is I think they're now going to have to go all out for the big pay-per-views. And to be honest, people know my thoughts on the Joshua-Dillian Whyte fight, but I think Joshua needs to be taken slowly. You know, there was a lot to work on after that performance from Dillian Whyte. A lot to work on. A lot to work on defensively and a lot to work on in terms of stamina. The fact that Anthony Joshua hadn't gone rounds before that fight really told. The fact that Anthony Joshua had never been hit in a professional ring before that fight really told. And to be honest, whilst he deserved to win against Dillian Whyte, and whilst he proved to be the better fighter on the night, I would have concerns that if Anthony Joshua had been in with a superior fighter to Dillian Whyte, let's say proven top 15 world level, he would have lost that night. I don't think his stamina held up as well as it could have done. I think there were some defensive questions exposed, and to me, I still see some punch resistance questions exposed. And I'm not just talking about the big hook Dillian Whyte landed on Anthony Joshua, because that would have hurt anyone. I'm talking about some of the times when Joshua got hit to the body. And for me, he looked super uncomfortable and super unnatural when that happened. You know, if I was managing Anthony Joshua now, I'd kind of be thinking, right, we need to find him 2 or 3 opponents of the similar level. We need to get him going 12 rounds. We need to give him that experience before the world title fight. But I'm not sure the Hearns have the luxury of doing that. I think there's big pressure from Sky. You know, let's not forget, Eddie Hearn's stable 2 or 3 years ago, you know, you had Carl Frost, retired. Kell Brook hasn't turned into a pay-per-view fighter. James DeGale, you know, has signed with Al Heyman. Anthony Joshua, at present, is Matchroom's marquee pay-per-view fighter. And I think the pressure that the Hearns will be under to make him pay-per-view every fight is huge. And I actually think, David Hay aside, there are not pay-per-view fights out there for Anthony Joshua that will be as successful as the Dillian Whyte fight unless you go down the world title route. And I think that's why Anthony Joshua risks being rushed. You know, there are certain parts to his game that for me are still slightly novice-y. You know, he's a very good prospect, but he lacks the refinement for me of a world champion at this stage. He, for me, is not the most instinctive and natural when the fire is coming back at him. And that's purely because he hasn't got enough experience. You know, whilst he's had 14, 15 fights, whatever it is, he's not gone very many rounds at all. He's not fought many live opponents who've thrown back at him. And I think those type of fights really would add benefit to Joshua. If I was managing Joshua this year, I'd have him fighting Johan Depar, I'd have him fighting Marius Wok, I'd have him fighting Alexander Ustinov, I'd maybe end the year against a Bermain Stavern or a Bryant Jennings. And I think that would give him the perfect footing to have a crack at the World Championships in 2017. But the Hearns don't necessarily have that luxury, because Anthony Joshua versus Johan Depar is not going to be a pay-per-view fight in the same mould, you know, in terms of success, as Anthony Joshua Dillian Whyte. Now, for Joshua's development, I hope that the Hearns can put that aside and work with Sky and see the long term. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I want to pay pay-per-view for a Johan Depar fight, but I hope that they can slow it down a bit, not rush Joshua too much. Because at this stage, if he steps up too fast too soon, I still think there's risk that he'll get exposed. And we know what happened when David Price stepped up from British level to top 10 level. You know, the same thing could happen to Anthony Joshua, because the flaws in his game, whilst expected for a prospect, are there to be seen. And I just wonder if, unlike all the other prospects, Hughie Fury, Joseph Parker, Andy Ruiz, I'm not sure that Anthony Joshua will be given the time and the right fights to develop. I don't see him becoming world champion in 2016. You know, you got Fury, Klitschko both tied up for several months, and there's no suggestion at all that the winner of that fight will have a voluntary against Anthony Joshua. Deontay Wilder, well, he's fighting Arthur Spilka. You know, following that fight, he's going to be tied up for several months as he fights Alexander Povetkin. You know, there's no suggestion that Povetkin or Wilder will give Anthony Joshua a voluntary. Now, the IBF route is most likely. You've got Charles Martin and you've got Glazkov fighting for a vacant belt. Neither of those guys have earned massive money in their careers so far. There's the potential that Eddie Hearn could put up a massive purse to get those guys to come over to the UK. Is that the most likely route? Possibly. Are those the most winnable fighters to go up against? Definitely. But wouldn't it be more sensible to forego the pay-per-view model and get Anthony Joshua the fights he needs before putting him on that world level? You know, there's no need to rush him. He's a young man. He's got loads of talent. He's early in his career. But there are still things to work on. And that's not a negative. There are still things to work on with any 15-fight professional. No 15-fight professional is perfect. You know, if you go back and look at Floyd Mayweather or Tyson Fury or any of these guys in their 15 fights, you'll notice the improvements they've made since then. You know, this is what happens in boxing. You improve as you gain the experience. I'm just not sure that Joshua's gained that experience yet. Let me know your thoughts. Do leave your comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, do give me the thumbs up. I'll certainly be doing another video when Joshua's opponent is announced, whoever that may be. So if you'd be interested in hearing my pre-fight thoughts, please do subscribe to the channel. I wouldn't want you to miss out on that. Many thanks as always for watching.